Here's how to remove a FoMoCo system from a Honda Insight. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this red cover and turn this switch off. And then we're gonna take and unplug this blue Anderson connector here. And we're going to put on our high voltage gloves. Next, we're gonna remove all 6 of these orange covers. And then we're going to loosen these nuts. Next, we're gonna remove these nuts, starting with the 4+ to 5-. If you don't have the 4+ to 5-, you're gonna instead have a cable that goes from here over to there. We'll remove that first. Now we'll remove this cable. Next, we'll remove this guy if you have the 5th module. And then we will remove this connector here by pulling these tabs out. Now we're going to remove these 4 bolts. This bolt we'll remove first. It has this green temperature sensor on it, so you need to make sure that as you unscrew this bolt, it doesn't twist because it will break the temperature sensor. So there's a standoff here that the temperature sensor is taped to, and you want to make sure that that doesn't twist. So when we pull this off, you can see how the temperature sensor is attached. We'll take and remove this guy and just set him off to the side for now. The other 3 bolts here don't have anything special about them. At this point, we can remove this 5th module if it's installed. So next, we're going to remove these 8 remaining bolts here. Again, we have a temperature sensor on this one, so we'll remove it first. Next, we need to remove this nut. And if it's already zip tied up, that's great. If not, you'll need to zip tie it there so that it doesn't get lost or short out to anything. And we need to unplug this cable here. And now we can pull this module back here and then remove it. Next, we're going to remove this nut right here. This guy should kind of just hang out up here. If not, you'll need to zip tie it in place. Next, I'm going to take and put a zip tie through a hole in this IMA cover right here. The reason we're doing this is so that we can stick this high voltage cable in. So this will go there once we remove it. So we will loosen that. And then we'll take this guy, pull him off like that. You might need to move these temperature sensors. And while we're holding this with the right hand, we'll go ahead and unplug this ribbon cable. And then we'll go and put this here. I'm trying not to touch the chassis with that. Again, if you followed all the steps so far, you can short this to the chassis, but if anything has gone wrong, you don't want to do that if you don't have to. So now we can remove this module. Now that we have all 3 of the top modules off, we need to unplug the temperature sensors. There's this reminder here, unplug the temp sensors before removing the tray. I mentioned this during installation, but if you remove this tray right now, you will rip all of these temp sensors off the board, which will break it. It's not something you can fix. I can't fix it either. So to remove these, you push down on the top and then pull out. So I'm going to push down on the top with my pointer finger and then pull out. So 1, 2, and 3. Next, we're going to unplug the grid charger input power there. And then we're also going to come in here and unplug this cable right here. This cable, particularly if you have the heater option, can be quite difficult to unplug. What you want to make sure you don't do is pull on the wires. You want to be grasping the connectors, not the wires. There's a hole here you can use to help you hold on to this. If you need to, you can move this. At this point, if you have the switch off, we've removed most of the voltage here. I'm not wearing gloves. You probably should. You don't need to. So you can see I can touch that just fine, but don't tempt fate if you don't know what you're doing. I'm going to move that out over off to the side a little bit. That'll give me a little more room in here to unplug this connector. So I'm going to come in and just work on it here like that. So I removed this connector without pulling on the wires. Again, if you pull on these wires, you might break it. While we're in here, we're going to remove the temperature sensor harness. To do that, we're going to unplug the Anderson connectors. There's one here, there's one there. And then to remove it, I'm pushing this tab with my right thumb, and then I'm pulling up with this screwdriver, and then we're going to pull that out. And we can remove this harness entirely. We need to unplug this 2-position blue harness there. And we're also going to unplug the IMA harness here. And so again, to do that, I'm going to take my thumb, I'm going to push the tab here, and then I'm going to pry backwards, or down rather, with a flathead screwdriver. And we're going to unplug this 2-position red-black connector there. And we're also going to remove all of these guys. Okay, so I've removed all of the IMA connectors here. And so with that, we should be able to remove this middle tray. So we will just set this off to the side for now. Next, we're going to remove this mica sheet. To do that, we'll just remove this tape. You'll probably have electric tape here, not capped on. Next, we're going to take and remove these two orange covers here, and then we're going to loosen these nuts. And then we'll pull this cable off. And as soon as you remove this cable, there is no longer high voltage in this system. Next, we're going to remove these two covers and then loosen the nuts. And with this one, we'll also remove the cable that's sticking up here. Next, we're going to remove these ribbon connectors here. And then we will unplug them from the LiBCM PCB. And then we can remove this wire harness. Next, we're going to remove the high voltage cables and this ground here. You might need to move this out of the way a bit. And we need to remove this high voltage DC-DC input. I'm going to move these off this way so they're not in the way when we go to remove this entire assembly. Now we're going to come in here, take our flathead again. We're going to remove the 4 MCM connectors. I'm going to push the tabs are on the right, and then you kind of just pry backwards here. So at this point, we should be able to remove the MCM wire harness. And you can see that these ribbon cables are around the backside wires, so we can go ahead and remove these off the back of the LiBCM PCB. This might not need to happen now. Eventually, you'll need to take these ribbons off. And the MCM-E is also in the way, so I'm going to remove that. And now we can remove the IMA wire harness. Next, we're going to remove the LiBCM PCB, and we're going to do that with a 7mm socket. And you shouldn't need a driver to remove the 4 nuts that are on the back side here. Now we're going to remove the 4 bolts that are holding the tray in. And then there's one more bolt we have to remove down here. It's a 10mm. And now we can remove this tray. Now that we have the tray out, we can remove the power cable. And we can take the tray off. If you modified the DC-DC converter for 60S, you can leave this on. Once you've modified it, it'll work with anything.